Okay, so our first look at Super Bowl salaries for the February 13th showdown between the Bengals and Rams. And we have a massive millionaire contest for this one, of course we do. $6 million in total prizes, with $1 million going to first, all right? It's only $15 to enter, and it's never too early to reserve your spot in the contest. Go check it out in the DraftKings lobby right now while these guys help you with your lineups. We're going to start here by taking a look at salaries of big-name players, and tell me who you'd rather have. So we got Matt Stafford in the captain spot. He's going to be $16,200. In the flex, $10,800. Or Burrow, if you put him in your captain spot, $15,900. In the flex, he's $10,600. Pierce, what do we think?
I'll take Burrow. I don't think Stafford is going to have a good game, but the biggest issue with Stafford is if you roster him, then you have to roster Cooper Kupp, and then you have absolutely no money left whatsoever to build a lineup. Whereas if you go with Burrow, and I know Burrow hasn't thrown for 400 yards, and in these playoff games, he is facing playoff defenses, and I don't really expect any of these quarterbacks to go over 300 yards. I don't expect really them to have a big game either. I just want the quarterback that allows me to build a better lineup, and I like my chances with Burrow and some of these secondary and tertiary receivers.
All right, what do we think out of these two guys? Steve, who do you like better?
Yeah, I was all prepared to talk about Patrick Mahomes because on our show on Sunday, everyone was saying how crazy I was that, the Bengals aren't going to beat the Chiefs. So why am I talking about Joe Burrow? Well, look at those two idiots aren't on the show today. Big surprise. They have to go tuck in their tails and leave. So let's talk about the man of the hour, Joe Burrow, and how he's going to light this Rams team up. Now, look, they got a very, very strong, front four that he's going to have to deal with. And we've seen what happens when Joe Burrow gets under pressure. I mean, he got sacked 9 times in that game against the Tennessee Titans. Newsflash, though, even though he got sacked 9 times, still threw for 348 yards, completing almost 76% of his pass attempts in that game. He's going to be feeling that same type of pressure in this one here. But with that being said, I think Burrow has shown on multiple occasions now that he is more than, tough enough to do that and be able to get through that. Look at the adjustments the Bengals made in the second half of that game. It was unbelievable to make the Chiefs look as bad as they was, and he really wasn't even under pressure in the second half. So if they can do that for this game, they have 2 weeks to prepare. That's going to be one of the best, the most important things that they have to do. This is one of those games where I think Burrow can light up that opposing secondary, so I love using Burrow in this spot.
All right, who do you like in this spot, Matt?
So I'm going to talk slate dynamics a little bit because I think that most people are going to play Burrow and pass catchers. That's just kind of what I'm hearing, not just from Steve and Pearce. It kind of just seems like that's the chalk build. That's what people are going to do. In terms of price, I mean, Burrow and Stafford are similar and they're priced pretty similarly. So I don't have a strong take as far as who is more undervalued price-wise, but I do think Burrow and the Bengals receivers will be the chalk. And to Pierce's point about Cooper Kupp, it's hard to fit Cooper Kupp, and this slate doesn't really have a ton of value. And to me, Stafford with Kupp, with some other weirdness in the lineup after that, that feels actually relatively contrarian. So I kind of want to start the lineup with Stafford, maybe not in the captain spot, because I think the lineup that you make with Stafford has a better shot to win tournaments than the lineup that you make with Burrow.
All right, guys, let's go to running back here. So you've got Joe Mixon or Cam Akers. So Mixon's going to be like 14.4 in the captain, 9.6 in the flex. 9.6 is also going to be the price tag for Akers in the captain spot. And then you could also save more than $3,000 here and get him in the flex for $6,400. Steve, what do you want to do here? Akers, the workload, we mentioned it on the Sunday show. His workload's been there, but the production, not necessarily.
Yeah, and that continued again against the 49ers. He was a little bit better than we've seen in the past. I mean, he had 48 yards, which is what he had the week before, but, he did it on, about 10 less carries. So that was a lot more efficient than we've seen before. The only problem is that Akers doesn't really get a ton of work out of the backfield. He has maybe 1 or 2 targets since he's come back here, whereas Mixon has been getting those targets more consistently. I think he had 3 last week against the Chiefs. Yeah, he had 3 last week against the Chiefs. That's been something they've been using him a lot more in. If I'm being totally honest, I'm not really crazy about using either of these guys in my lineup here. I think I want to go pretty heavy on these pass catchers. So I'm not really looking to take either of these guys, but I would say whatever lineup you're building that team for, then you want to be using, that team's running back in that sense. I don't think either of these guys are going to be overly productive in these matchups. So pretty tough run defenses on both sides. So I would say if you're making a lineup, I'm not crazy about either, but I would take Mixon because he has more upside in the PPR scoring.
All right, Matty, Mixon or Akers?
So So I agree with Steve that I don't love these guys for their prices. I mean, Mixon is in the same pricing tier as Kupp, Chase, Burrow, Stafford, and then Akers is a lot less expensive, but we do have to worry about Sony Michel taking a lot of his work. But at the same time, I think these two guys will be actually very contrarian plays, and Joe Mixon might be my favorite captain for the Super Bowl because I think no one is doing that. I mean, you look at this game, it's clearly a matchup of quarterbacks and star receivers and all of that. I think a lot of people will want to have one of those top 4 guys as the captain in their lineup, and Mixon just doesn't feel right. The Bengals are underdogs. I think even though it sounds like a lot of people want the Bengals to win, I think most people ultimately are expecting the Rams to win. And the situation where Mixon performs the best is one where the Bengals have the lead. So even though I think the Rams are going to win, I think it's likely enough the Bengals are in the game that Mixon does have a good chance for an upside game. And it just doesn't seem like an outcome anyone's playing for. So, yeah, Mixon is really good running back, gets the ball near the goal line, like all the things you want. It's just he's a little expensive. So despite that, I still want to play him.
All right, Pearce, is Mixon a no-brainer here over Akers?
I wouldn't say it's a no-brainer. I think Steve's right that I would rather not roster either one of these guys, but to Matt's point, that's probably going to be the popular sentiment, and so no one's going to play Mixon, especially as a captain, and we know he's going to get goal line carries. We know that Cincinnati is committed to the run. They were down 21 points last week. They didn't abandon the run. Also, to Steve's point, they will get the ball to him out of the backfield. They set up these screen passes as a part of their game plan, especially if there's going to be a strong pass rush coming at them. You would expect some draws and some running back passes to him and Samaje Perine. So I'd also consider Perine too, pairing him with him or even putting Perine in the captain spot.
All right, let's talk about wide receivers. This is like the big story of the Super Bowl, right? Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase. Cooper Kupp is the most expensive option on the slate in the captain spot. He had 40 fantasy points last time out, so obviously,
incredible game
and absolutely amazing. Jamar Chase had under 18 fantasy points, obviously still got a lot of usage. So, Matt, who are you choosing? You kind of got to have Cooper Kupp, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm taking Cooper Kupp. You're definitely right. The price differential between Kupp and Chase, it's only $1,200, and Kupp is way more than $1,200 better than Jamar Chase. I mean, they're in the same game, so it kind of complicates things. This isn't our typical slate where we're comparing these types of top-end receivers because they're actually going against each other. And the better Cooper Kupp plays, the more the Bengals are going to have to throw, and then the better Jamar Chase does. So it's not just like one guy could have a monster game, the other guy does nothing. But I just think ultimately Cooper Kupp's volume is so much higher that even though he doesn't have quite as much down the field threat as Jamar Chase, he's not as good after the catch. He's so much better at just about everything else that, like, the amount of targets, the amount of times he's going to get open, it's so likely to add up to a big game for him that even if you want to play a contrarian lineup, I think if there's a chalky player you almost have to use, it's Cooper Kupp. That isn't to say you can't make a lineup without him, but of the popular players in this game, he's by far my favorite.
Pierce, what do you think? You got to eat the chalk with Kupp?
So Matt says that he's the chalk player and that everyone's going to play him, so then they're going to pay him with Matt Stafford. But Matt also says that Matt Stafford and Kupp's going to be contrarian. I don't think Matt Stafford and Kupp is going to be contrarian. I think a lot of people are going to go that route, and then everyone's going to find themselves in the same hole, playing the same crap players. And so you're going to have bad lineups, and the best way to differentiate would be go with those Cincinnati running backs, go with the Cincinnati stack. I would go Jamar Chase. I think Kupp can have a good game. He always has these really good games. I think he'll have a solid game. He's going to deal with a lot more double coverage in this game. He'll get 25 fantasy points, but 25 is not going to get it done, whereas Chase can explode. I don't think they're going to double team Chase enough. And if it's Chase versus Ramsey, I'll take Chase every single time on that and hope for those big 30, 40, 50-yard touchdown plays.
Steve, what do we think?
I think Chase is the preferred option too, because, it's not a huge price difference, but it's enough that it gives you some flexibility. Whereas if, like Pierce said earlier, if you're using Stafford, you have to pair him with Kupp. I mean, look at the game that Odell Beckham had last week. I mean, he was a huge part of that offense. I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough. 9 receptions on 11 targets for 113 yards. That was a huge game by him last week. So if I'm pairing with Stafford, I want to be a little bit different. I have no problem using Stafford with Beckham because they're giving him the ball enough, and he has a massive discount off of Cooper Kupp. It is scary to fade Cooper Kupp, but at this point, it's like you don't need to listen to any of us and be like, oh, you should play Cooper Kupp. Like, no kidding. Like, oh, I should get out of bed today. These are all things that we do on a daily basis, so it's obvious. But I think pairing Stafford with Beckham is the way to do that because then you can also afford Chase too and have some flexibility. So not saying you need to fade Cooper Kupp, but if you want to have a lineup that you can actually feel like has some, wiggle room and can score some points, I think that's the way you got to do it.
There are some days I do not feel like getting out of bed.
Hey, I'm with you.
Days.
You know what I mean? I know,
That's
Steve. We
normal, right?
FaceTime before when we're both in bed.
All right.
All right. You mentioned OBJ, dude. So he's 12-6 in the captain spot. What about like T. Higgins? Like between those two, what do you do? Because OBJ looked absolutely fire. He just didn't score, right? Last game.
Yeah, I mean, if he was able to score, I mean, that would have been a huge game for him. The only problem with T. Higgins is that he just doesn't get in the end zone enough. Like, there are so many mouths to feed in that Cincinnati offense that, like, Higgins had a huge game last week, over 100 yards on 6 catches. He had a huge game against the Chiefs, but it almost feels like a bit of an anomaly here because there's, like I mentioned, there's so many mouths to feed in that offense, whether it's, if they're using Chase or it's Tyler Boyd. I know Uzama's going to be out, so that will open up some targets because they're really not going to go to Drew Sample. He's more of a blocking tight end than a receiving tight end, but I just think I would much rather use OBJ in this spot here too. Price difference isn't too crazy. $7,600 for Higgins, $8,400 for Beckham. So you're really not saving too much here. But if they are somehow able to limit Kupp, the ball is going to go to Beckham, and that's where the points are going to come from. So I'd be taking Beckham here.
All right, Pearce, taking Beckham.
Nope, I'm going to go with Higgins. The Rams' problem is actually one of their strengths. They have too many good pass rushers, which means they often blitz or bring 5 or more guys, and that opens up spots, those short middle routes. We saw Jimmy Garoppolo exploit that last week, and we're going to see Joe Burrow do the exact same thing. If you watch the game against Kansas City, they turned things around because Joe Burrow started passing the ball quickly. When it wasn't a play action, he averaged 4.3 yards per pass attempt. They're throwing all these short passes. That's what you can take advantage of against this Rams defense. We've seen Higgins go for these short routes over the middle. You also could see Boyd making these plays as well. I would expect them to go with a lot of these short, quick routes, even to Mixon out of the backfield. So I'm definitely going to keep playing these Bengals receivers.
All right, Matt, which one do you side with, OBJ or Higgins?
I really like both guys, honestly. And just to go back to the Cooper Kupp thing briefly, he was less popular than both Tyreek Hill and Jamar Chase in the Millionaire Contest this past weekend. Like, even though everyone knows to play Kupp, we get these slates where people just don't want to play him because it's too hard to fit him, and then you end up playing Higgins or Beckham instead. I like this price range in general because I do think that stars and scrubs just kind of ends up being the way, and we'll get there with the value plays, but I do think that people want to play Burrow, and they want to play Kupp or Stafford. So the contrarian thing, I think, is playing them together. I think a lot of lineups will have one, not the other. That's kind of what I was saying there. And then you end up with people playing cheaper players too. So I actually like Higgins and Beckham both a lot. If I have to pick one, I'll go with Higgins, but I'm a big fan of both of those players for this slate.